We already have a lot of evidence with things like Second Life that this can be done, this can happen. In 1999, when I was starting Linden Lab, I mean, it was a lot harder. I don't think any of us, even those of us here, understand, once this all starts to work, how large a space we're talking about. I think we're talking about the same scale as the consumer internet today. People are ready.
Was that Philip Rosedale?
Yep, indeed.
And he didn't record the station ID for you?
Nope, he won't answer my calls.
Shall I do one?
Well, you might as well be my guest.
And here we go. You are listening to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Jo Yardley.
Pretty good. Hello there and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Jo Yardley. My name is Draxter Dupre. I'm here with Jo in 1920s Berlin in an attic full of awesome antique radio equipment. And we got to open this to the public. Fresh drinks, not those fresh drinks. And terrible cigarette smoke. Hi, Jo.
Hello.
We're not wearing our Oculus Rifts today.
No, I hate it. I'm bored with it. It's
Yeah. It's absolutely has nothing to do with immersion. You know, it's just...
No, it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. It's just crap. No, of course it works and it's amazing. And... But we're not going to talk about it, but we'll talk a lot about Philip Rosedale, our founder and dear Lord Almighty, who actually will mention the Oculus several times today throughout the hour.
There's just no escaping it. We're sorry, but it's taking over the world.
We have Philip Rosedale, Linden Lab founder, past board member of Linden Lab, now heading the new virtual world venture High Fidelity. He gave a presentation recently at the Silicon Valley Virtual Reality Meetup, and we'll play excerpts of that. More importantly, the virtual world's best practices for education conferences in full swing. As you're listening to this podcast, you may be waiting for current Linden Lab CEO Ebbe Altbrecht to give his keynote entitled Reconnecting with the Educational Community. We will have excerpts and analysis of that next week. Today, first a few housekeeping notes. Please subscribe to the show on Stitcher. You find the banner on the right. It's a great way to be up to date and mobile with the show. It's really a must-have app for any podcast or radio fan, and we're glad that they're sponsoring the show. You can also always call us on Skype, Draxfiles, email radio@draxfiles.com, or send in-world message if you want to get in touch. Speaking of calling and sponsors, we mentioned a few weeks back that a Leap Motion gesture interface can be yours if you leave us a Skype voicemail. If you leave us a Skype voicemail with your opinion on how the Facebook Oculus Rift deal will impact Second Life. Now, we have an average of 1,000 listeners per week, Jo.
That's pretty good.
But only 2 folks called, and one of them is our best pal, Victor Mornington, who we love, not only because of his Scottish accent, but he always calls. So I wonder really why not more people call, especially when there's a Leap Motion on the table.
Get one of those pretty young girls to answer the phone.
I'll put a second Leap Motion on the table, and if you want to enter the random drawing, call us with your opinion on the aforementioned issue by this coming Thursday, 10 a.m. Otherwise, Victor Mornington will get one automatically. Is that a good deal?
That's a good deal.
All right, so this just in, before we get to the core of the show, Jo, you brought my attention to an article about a patent that Apple Computer filed back in 2010 about avatars and facial expressions and online representation and digital selves. And this article is entitled, Why Apple Thinks 3D Avatars Will Be the Future of Online Identities. Oh my God, everything is converging. Avatars, 3D, and identity.
Yeah, I have just spotted that on Facebook. Pookie Amsterdam shared it there first. They've been working on something like this for quite a while. Apple is also sort of, getting in on the game of 3D virtual avatars.
Well, here in the article it says facial expression, body language, accessories, clothing items. I mean, I see, what else could it be other than the core of representing us online while we interact?
What you're doing is using a simple webcam to create an avatar from you, with the images it makes from you. I was wondering, why haven't we been doing this in Second Life? I know that years ago there was some sort of option where you could have an avatar made with pictures of yourself, which was not cheap.
Oh, there was actually the cyber extruder. I did a machinima about that. You're right. I totally forgot about that.
That was an interesting service provided. No, this seems very, very simple and very easy to do for people at home, where you just use your webcam or whatever to make pictures of yourself and turn it into an avatar.
Well, we'll talk about how high fidelity in a minute later in the show, and we will see what Philip Rosedale has been up to in terms of facial expression.
The interesting thing is not the software. It's not that they want to do this, because it seems like a fun gadget, and I'm sure they can think of a few things to do with it.
Yeah, shopping.
Yeah, but the most interesting thing is, what are their plans? Are they, just like at the moment everyone else, it seems, are they planning something with virtual reality? I mean, they're
Apple
not crazy.
Land. It will be the Appleverse.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they're not stupid. They know that virtual reality is coming. They know that it's going to be big. Are they the kind of company that sits at the side while things are happening?
Well, then we have the choice between Appleverse and Faceverse.
Perhaps we're going to have lots of universes to choose from. And if we're really lucky, we're going to finally get the multiverse, where we can actually travel from one world to another. Then everything is going to be fine. If all these worlds are going to be separate, we're going to have issues.
This leads us perfectly to Philip Rosedale, because he gave a presentation of what he's been working on in high fidelity at the Silicon Valley Virtual Reality Meetup in San Jose, and there's a full video out there. It's utterly amazing. There are other quite interesting demonstrations also, one by the guys who make the Cast AR augmented reality / virtual reality sort of hybrid device, which is really cool, and we have those guys lined up too for a future show. But Philip is demoing with a PrimeSense camera that picks up his facial expressions, right, in the near field. They translate onto an avatar in real time. He has two Razer Hydra motion controllers in his both his hands. He's waving them around, and he interacts with the virtual space with those devices in real time, and it's just totally amazing when you see it.
The network latencies are low enough to allow this presence, this actual sense of connection and immersion with somebody. The machines are so fast, we don't even know what to do with them to slow them down.
He shows an avatar which looks a lot like a cartoon, which is a bit of a shame, because I'm a very visual person. I want things to look really nice. But all of this is filmed by the webcam, and you can actually see the face of the avatar move when he's talking, when he's raising his eyebrows. You can see that on the avatar, which is really cool.
With very, very, very little latency detectable in this video. The eyebrows raised, the mouth open, closed, the head turning, tilting. So the camera is sensing his motion. We have zero latency, and then he starts to build.
You can build in Second Life, by clicking on things and dragging and turning. You can do the same thing in AutoCAD. But if I hit the keys here, right, I'm building voxels there, solids, basically in the world in real time. I can click down there and switch the colors. Now, one of the things that you'll see when you jump into our alpha is everything here, this tool that I'm showing you, the way that it maps the motions of my hands of the Hydra to stuff in the world, is done completely in JavaScript that has support in it for the Hydra controllers, and they're being drawn in. What you're seeing right now is a bit like Minecraft, but imagine a Minecraft where you can make the blocks smaller.
Another thing I really liked, the avatar that he's talking with, whispering into his left and then his right ear. He actually hears it coming from his left headset earpiece and then the other. I've experienced anything like that in Second Life, not through that degree, not in that detail.
Yeah, and so this is a voxel-based virtual world, which means that these voxels are cubes, kind of like prims, but they can be made so incredibly small that, according to Philip, you will be able to create very complex structures and very organic shapes by arranging them in a certain way. Let's listen to another soundbite. We link to the full video. It's from the Silicon Valley Virtual Reality Meetup. It's an hour and a half long. There's a couple of other very interesting presentations prior to Philip. His demo starts at about the 40-minute mark. Here's Philip on what the company will do, a little bit hinting at the business model to come.
We're going to build a couple of network layers that you're not going to have to use, but that we hope you probably will use. Things like unique names. This club has a single location, a single text name in the whole virtual world. We will run, as a company, those servers. You will run and share all these different devices that are simulating the world. We will build a new currency. very possibly a new cryptocurrency actually, to deploy to allow everyone to recognize the contribution that you're making of these server machines. So that there's basically a fluid economy like there is around goods and services in Second Life, but now one that actually includes the server and equipment layer itself in the virtual world.
So this is quite interesting, and High Fidelity is in alpha. We know we have a few friends who are in there, and they can talk about stuff. Google is an investor. Linden Lab is an investor, as we know. The Uncanny Valley is being addressed at the Silicon Valley Virtual Reality Meetup. I put some video links in the blog, and Philip explains in that context why his avatar looks somewhat cartoonish, the High Fidelity avatar.
There is this switch over moment where you go from that's really nice, or that's really realistic and cute, to oh my god, something is terribly wrong.
Yeah.
The little thing is not if an avatar or a robot or whatever is too human. The problem is when it's just not human enough. If it's completely non-human, like R2D2 or something like that, that's fine. We usually think that is cute. That's funny. There's no problem with that. If it is exactly like humans, we'll probably be fine with that as well. We go, oh, look, that's a robot or an avatar and it looks really real. Oh, well, fine. Because, we've already seen it in movies, although we may probably not realize it, that some of the actors that we're watching are already completely unreal, even though they look just like real people. But if you get that little thing where you're watching a human avatar that looks really real, but there's something off. For instance, they haven't quite got the expressions right, or they don't talk in sync, like every movie on German television. You're watching it and you go, what's up?
Our brain cannot compute that.
Your brain tells you something is not right here.
That creates that fear. Yeah, that's what people talk about with these new mesh avatars that are coming more and more onto SL Marketplace. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, Ebbe is one.
Really? Oh.
He was hanging out in 1920s Berlin having a beer with us all, and he was completely mesh.
Oh wow!
And when I saw him yesterday at the conference, he was a completely different mesh avatar.
He spends way too much time in the world. I want him to go back and work. But speaking of the virtual world's best practice of education, the conference is in full swing right now. There's hundreds of people were at the Philip keynote. Maria Korolov from Hypergrid, who was on our show, is also speaking as we tape, as a matter of fact. So it's a huge success, and it shows clearly that education in Second Life, or using Second Life for educational purposes, is sort of the killer app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now back to Philip. His keynote was entitled "Closing the Gap: Virtual Reality in Education." Naturally, he spoke a lot about High Fidelity, and there's a little overlap with what he talked about in San Jose at the virtual reality meetup. But here we go. And of course, Jo, he addressed you right at the top of his talk. Nobody else here. He didn't even acknowledge that Fluffy was in the audience. He addressed you. Let's listen to this.
Glad to see everybody here and a few familiar faces. I think I saw Jo Yardley there chatting in text, and I know I just saw a great update from her blog on the work we're doing at High Fidelity. So thanks, Jo, for doing that work. I guess the first question is, as they say, where's my jetpack? Why aren't there 1 billion people using virtual worlds today? I guess the first thing I'd say is it's not for lack of passion and capability and actual examples. The things that are here in Second Life, as we all know, are just absolutely jaw-dropping. Everybody here has had one or more or dozens of moments where you just, you just kind of stood there almost speechless. It's just incredibly hard to get in. In fact, I think one of the very few things we all here in Second Life have in common, one of the very few things, and I think that's great, it's such tremendous diversity here of work and people and cultures and everything. We have a willingness to devote a tremendous amount of time and energy into learning how to get in here, how to interact with things, how to communicate with people. These are things that are extremely challenging things to do in virtual reality today. And so why is that? When Second Life came out, everybody said, well, the UI is not quite right. You got to make the UI and the user experience really good. You got to make it work for everybody. And as soon as you guys sort out a couple of issues around how this darned, UI works, why, there's going to be billions of people in here. And the fact is that didn't happen. And it wasn't just us trying. There was about $500 million in venture capital spent on companies that tried to compete with Second Life. And with a very few exceptions, those companies are all gone now. And so why is it that user interface design didn't sort of cross that gap and get us all in here? And let me tell you what I think it is. I think it's the mouse. And that's why we're in such an exciting time today. A mouse has 2 degrees of freedom. You can move your finger up and down and side to side. That's what I mean by 2 degrees of freedom. So you can only move in 2 directions at once. Now, of course, as we all know, you can use your fingers to make a kind of a chord on the keyboard, if you will, and you can use that chord to tell the computer to do other stuff. So, of course, you can sort of translate that side-to-side motion into an up or down motion, or a rotating motion if you're grabbing an object, but you have to use your other fingers on the keyboard to do that. And I believe that process of kind of using your fingers in that way, kind of playing a chord and moving the mouse, is just incredibly, incredibly difficult. I think it's like learning to play the piano. So we got a lot of piano players in here, myself included. A lot of you guys are much better at it than me. But make no mistake, I think that you've learned a skill that is tremendously challenging and an amazing skill you should be proud of. That level of difficulty means that you've got to spend 10 or 12 hours, just kind of getting your feet on the ground in here. And that's something that 1 billion people aren't going to do. I think the other problem is that it's hard to communicate with each other in here. We're all in here using either our hands, text on the keyboards, our ability to animate and move our avatars' bodies a little bit, and some of us are using, like I am right now, voice to talk. Human communication, in its richest form, has a tremendous amount of, multiple modality. It enables us to establish, for example, empathy and synchronization and kind of deep understanding within seconds in many cases. It lets us communicate in very powerful ways. Now, of course, we've learned here to use the venue of text and a little bit of avatar animation to communicate in ways that the human race had never learned before. And of course, that's one of the things that's so inspiring about Second Life. It's still a very thin pipe. Pushing our kind of minds when we're face to face with each other through the tiny pipe of text and a little bit of voice and a little bit of body movement. It's pretty hard to push ourselves through that pipe. So how do we get beyond that? As I'm going to say, I believe that those advances are here today. And so we're going to be able to add them to Second Life. We're going to be able to build new virtual worlds like high fidelity by using these advances. The first incredible advance is that we're not going to need to use the mouse much longer as our primary interface, and we're going to be able to use hardware devices to extend the richness of our ability to both communicate and manipulate the world. So let me talk about that. Now, we all know about the Oculus. Everybody's watched that. It's incredibly exciting to see Facebook buy Oculus and kind of validate our whole space here by doing that. It's just unbelievably cool that that's happened. It's going to bring a lot of eyes to the table. People are going to get curious again, I think, the way they were curious initially about Second Life in 2006 when we saw all the worldwide attention we got. So the Oculus is incredible because it basically does allow us to establish a real degree of visual immersion there. The word used by the folks at Valve and Oculus's presence was wonderful. Michael Abrash talk. I'm sure many of you have seen it, where he really does a great job elucidating the details of what sort of visual presence means, what makes you feel immersed in a world. But actually, I think the Oculus is almost the tip of the iceberg. It's a very hard problem, and I think those guys are going to continue to just do the amazing work they've done to continue to solve it. I've tried the DK2 prototypes. I'm sure some of you have as well. You are just going to fall down dead when you see the Oculus that's actually going to be released to the public in numbers. But there's a lot more work to be done. So, for example, motion controllers. If I was holding the Hydra controllers that I use in high fidelity right now, I would be able to talk to you with my hands. And right now, while I'm talking to you, I am using my hands, and it's a very powerful way to communicate. We all know that. But none of your hands are moving, and neither are mine. And the reason for that is we don't have motion controllers. There are a ton of different ways to detect the movement of our hands and our bodies that are coming out. There's the Hydra controllers that we use with high fidelity today. There are several amazing new technologies. 6 Sense, the company, is about to come out with the STEM system, which is just a really amazing system that I was using just the other night, and is just just the imagination of connecting a STEM system to Second Life is just too much to imagine. You've got this ability to basically move your whole hands and upper body skeleton absolutely perfectly, reach out, grab things on a table, certainly talk with your hands, grab somebody else. It's just incredible. And we're soon going to be able to have many, many more degrees of freedom. Now, a double hand controller like a Hydra basically gives me 12 degrees of freedom, 3 degrees of rotation and 3 degrees of translation or movement back and forth on each of my hands. That's an extraordinary, that's 12 degrees of freedom compared to 2 for the mouse. And that's not counting my head. So how do we follow the head? Now, you can use the Oculus to follow your head around, but in an education setting, you may not always want to put an Oculus on. For example, you might be sharing a room with other people and want to talk to them while you're using the virtual world, like many of us do with Second Life today. In that case, we're going to use cameras. Software is so fast. There's been so much good work done lately. And in addition to this, we now have the option in some cases of using 3D depth cameras that then make the process of sort of finding a person inside the camera much, much easier. We've got the Kinect, for the full body version, and then we've got the short range cameras like the PrimeSense camera that we're using with high fidelity. These 3D cameras allow us to do 2 important things. They allow us to capture the movement of the head. The other thing these 3D cameras can do is capture the face. I heard somebody write something very elegant the other day. They were talking about how online courses have not had as high a success rate as one might expect. That is, there's all this amazing online coursework you can do now. What the writer was saying was that there's something about being face-to-face. There's something about being in a classroom and having a teacher, a living teacher, not a book. And I think the person said something like, education is messy. Like, we don't actually understand it. And I think that maps very well onto the kind of work that we're doing at high fidelity and the magic of Second Life in general, which is that there's something about being next to people or feeling like you're really there with someone that somehow is magical and is important in so many human interactions. And nowhere is there a better example than education. To learn, we've got to be there with other people. I believe that if we can put ourselves really face-to-face with a teacher, for example, or in a small group learning something new, we're going to see all the great groundwork that's been done here just explode as that sort of magic person-to-person channel is opened up by the virtual environment. Beyond this idea of the Oculus, these motion controllers that are coming out, imminently, what else is going to take us across the gap there and bring this thing to 1 billion people? Well, first let me talk about latency. And the latency that we're exploring is one-on-one presence. If I take the link between you and I when we're standing next to each other in a virtual world, and I impose latency on that link, I start slowing down the flow of information between 2 individuals, where does the magic stop working? Now, how much latency can there be between you and me when we're just talking face-to-face to feel good? And the answer is, a lot of studies have been done on that. And the answer is a really good answer in this case. It's about 100 milliseconds, about 1/10 of a second. So the ITU, International Telecommunication Union, did a formal study on voice over IP when there was a lot of sort of IP telephony going on. And they did this study where they imposed latency between people, just like we've been doing. And they found that the number was about 150 milliseconds. At about 150 milliseconds, everybody started saying, this is a bad experience. We're interrupting each other. This doesn't feel good. And below about 150 milliseconds, they said, I can't tell. It's no different than just, talking face-to-face with somebody. So that's interesting. Now, that was on a voice connection only, but we've repeated these analyses and tests with different types of connections and imposing latencies on different things. And we found that the number of 100 milliseconds is probably about right for establishing one-on-one sort of emotional connection between 2 people that are talking to each other. So here's the thing. With all this new hardware, and by writing the networking layer and the pieces of software really well, you can get the delay down to 100 milliseconds. That is, everybody in the United States can talk face-to-face in a place like high fidelity and watch their faces move and their lips move with a less than 100 millisecond delay. By the way, your cell phone today is about 500 milliseconds, way over the ITU's number. And that's why we all hate using our cell phones. Skype is about 250 plus milliseconds if you've got video on. And voice over IP, such as you use typically in virtual worlds, is usually at about 800 milliseconds or worse. So it's really slow. We need to have fast networks, low latency, and new, well-written, specifically written software to enable that data to get back and forth between people at a really high speed, just like what's being done in custom hardware with the Oculus. But the good news is 100 milliseconds, by the way, is halfway around the world. 100 milliseconds is the ping time, one-way ping time, half the ping time, from here to Singapore. I've tried it. If 100 milliseconds works for basic human experience, if we can really be fundamentally in contact with each other emotionally, face-to-face, it means it's going to work for just about everybody on Earth. So I'm glad the Earth is actually as small as it is. If we'd ended up with a larger Earth, I wouldn't be able to tell you this good news. Let me talk now a little bit about the virtual. What do I think is the architecture of virtual worlds moving forward, and also of the virtual worlds that as educators you're probably going to be in and ultimately going to need. And I think there's obviously some of this for you guys. Forgive me if this seems obvious. You are the great thinkers that have been here, the longer than anybody. I made a blog post the other day about identity. I think people were talking a lot about identity in the wake of the Facebook acquisition. Facebook are very, very smart guys, and I think that I'm sure that they're thinking these same things, Facebook notwithstanding. I think identity is something that does continue to evolve to be more like the web in virtual worlds. I think identity disclosure, that is, my name is Philip Rosedale. I am really Philip Rosedale. Hi, my name's Philip. It's nice to meet you. I think that those things are not things that really should be tied to avatars. They're things that should be choices made by individuals who are using their avatars. So I've come to believe even that the sort of putting your name over your head like we all have here, and certainly putting a unique name over your head that is basically a handle that can be used to find you anywhere in the virtual world. We don't do that on the web. We certainly don't do it in real life, and I don't think long term we're going to do it in virtual worlds either. I think we have to basically walk up to each other and shake hands, and if you remember what I look like, well, the next time you see me, you'll know who I am. I don't think that having a fixed identity system in which we can sort of follow each other around everywhere and always get to somebody by a sort of a hashtag is likely to be the default case, at least for shared virtual worlds. So I think the virtual worlds of the future will have choices of identity. I think we're also going to need mechanisms, especially as educators. We're going to need mechanisms to basically say, hey, it's Philip Rosedale. It's really me. I'm here for my class. Here's my here's my driver's license. Of course, there's a lot of easy ways to do that, but I think we're going to need to build them. And so I'm not saying that we should be anonymous. I'm saying that when we want to declare who we are, we actually will probably, not only will we do it, but we'll have really great ways. We'll need to have great ways of identifying ourselves, to our coworkers or to an educator. Regardless whether you're doing education or design or play or art, we need some kind of a shared marketplace or exchange, which is probably independent of all the different servers, in which you can exchange content, in which you can pay for things, in which you can move stuff around. You obviously, again, this is patently obvious to everybody here, but if the future of virtual worlds, as I think it is an internetwork, that is, it's a world of worlds, it's many, many, many connected virtual worlds, enormously larger even than something like Second Life, how are we going to walk around in the same clothes between those worlds? We're going to need some sort of an exchange, a marketplace, place to buy things, place to move things around that allows us to move around. And of course, there's been lots of work done on that and things like OpenSim today and marketplaces that connect content there. As I've said many times in the past, I believe that for virtual worlds to really go the distance and become a fundamental tool that we all, as citizens of the planet, are using every day, they've got to be quite a bit more like the internet than they are today. The phenomena and the linking system and the software and everything has to be very akin to the web. That is, we've got to all be able to set up and run our own servers. But like the web, those servers need to be visually and spatially connected to each other. So I got to walk through a door if I want out of my room into yours, or I need to be able to, park my educational facility next to yours because there's a benefit to that. And we need to be able to sync up and figure out a way to tell everybody else that our two spaces are sitting next to each other. And if you look left from mine, you see yours. And if you look right from yours, you see mine. that kind of spatial interconnectedness between virtual worlds is, again, very akin to the hyperlink that has made the web so powerful, and I think it's what we're going to need to what we're going to need to build for virtual worlds. And of course, again, there's been lots of good initial work done on this. At High Fidelity, we're just trying to say, well, what comes next, and what are the basic tools that people need? If you need a way to be able to find each other, if you need a way to be able to find a location like San Francisco or Harvard University or something, well, you're probably going to have a lookup system that lets you type in Harvard University somewhere, and that's probably a lot like DNS. And this is something that we're thinking about as well. The code, the software probably needs to be open source. The protocols need to be inspectable, just like the web. Most of the stuff on the web that we trust today, things like SSL and DNS, are things that are either open source or open protocols. There's no off switch for the virtual world. There's no central agency that allows you to turn it on and off. I think the Ready Player One idea of kind of, one great company that controlled it all is a delightful dystopian fantasy, and it makes the fiction great, but I don't think it's likely that the virtual worlds of the future are that way. And I think the internet of websites today demonstrates that that's pretty much true. I mean, of course, we've all got our concerns about this or that big company, but the reality is that there are more companies today than ever before, and more participants in the dialogue about how things should work and how stuff should be controlled. So let's talk for a second about scale as a final thing now. I know that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of educators in Second Life. And moreover, I'm going to boldly assert that a great event like this would attract a good percentage of them. And yet, despite the fact that I think we're on a beautiful four-corner connect here of several sims, we're only able to interact together as audience and speaker with a few hundred people here. So that's great. That's better than anything that's been done in the past, and I'm super proud of it. But the stadium I'm standing in right now has a capacity for several thousand people to listen to me, and with the right audio, which of course is easy online, we can make it so that we can engage in a real conversation with those people. We can have a real forum, but we can't get thousands of people together in one place in a virtual world right now. We can't make that work yet. So scale, what does that mean? Well, it means several different things, and all things we're working on at High Fidelity, and all things that, again, lots of folks here have worked on. But I guess what I would say is these scaling problems are soluble. A typical server machine today, if you're holding a class and you want to have a bunch of people come to that class, when you step up the bandwidths to several megabits per person, as we're doing at High Fidelity, and you need to do that to carry all this data, very high quality audio, facial animation, all this stuff, right? It means that the amount of data that has to be sent out to each individual is, megabits of data at a time. Now, for those who are more technical here, you all know what that means, which is it means that like one internet server, one fast desktop machine, one computer inside an Amazon complex or whatever, it can only service like 10 to 100 people. And that's part of the challenge of Second Life. Now, Second Life has about 40,000 servers, which again is just incredible. But each of those servers can only serve, dozens of people at a time. And as we need to move more data over these networks, the number in some cases for a while will actually go down. So if we wanted to have a get together for several thousand people, we need, for the time of that get together, to have dozens of machines, or 100 or so or something machines available to us. We've built an architecture for it at High Fidelity. I'm sure other people will do their own experiments. I'm sure improvements to Second Life will also, start to go in that direction. Basically, as soon as people start showing up in this space, you got to start pulling up additional machines and kind of connecting those machines together in real time. There are architectures that have done this before, like Skype or BitTorrent. Technically, it's feasible to put 1,000 machines together. And for that matter, 1,000 machines serving a rock concert really aren't even all that expensive if you're only using them for a couple hours. The basic problem you run into, if you imagine a virtual world that has 1 billion people in it, is that there actually aren't enough servers out there to host them all. If everybody on the internet was simultaneously being delivered several megabits of data in real time and talking to each other, actually, there's probably not even enough servers out there. Now, Google has a lot of servers doing things like search, but if you start counting at places like Amazon and Rackspace, the number you get to is that the number of servers out there is probably somewhere around 500,000 to 1 million physical servers. By the way, it should make us all the more impressed with Second Life that we're actually using a significant percentage of those machines to run Second Life, which is pretty Pretty cool. But all in all, we've only got hundreds of thousands of machines available. So I believe, and this is what we're working on at High Fidelity, is the idea that we can get access to everybody's machines and use them as servers. Many of you have heard of projects like SETI, where you can dedicate your computer to searching for, looking at the radio signals coming from those big dishes and looking for, people out there in space. You can also dedicate your machine to do things like protein folding. Think about something like SETI, and then think, could we write a piece of software that not only lets you run your own internet server, your own virtual world server, but also lets you share your machine with your friends or with a larger community? Imagine a system that uses an economy like the Second Life economy to do that, and allows us to basically sort of borrow machines from each other whenever we need them. Done lots of work on this. We actually have it working. It's not ready for prime time yet, so you're not trying it yet. But I don't have anything for you to download right now. But we believe that this is a completely solvable problem, and that the next generation of virtual worlds can actually be built as a kind of a cloud of machines that are shared by and borrowed from all of us. And it would allow you as educators to very efficiently, at a low cost, pull those machines together. Why most of our machines that we've got when we're not using something like Second Life, when we're at work or something, we've got these big powerful desktop machines that are connected over, typically cable modem connections at, 50 megabits down and 10 megabits up. Those are very powerful machines. If we could borrow those from you, if you could borrow those from each other, you would. And that would potentially give us access to a lot more machines than we've ever had access to. I think we're going to do it to create the next generation of virtual worlds. And I think that the implication of being able to get access to a number of machines for the simulation and the streaming of the virtual world that is literally several orders of magnitude larger than even what we have in the entire physical plant on Earth. We got to be able to sort of see more stuff in the world. And so that is to say, when you fly up in the air in Second Life, why can't we see the whole thing, right? For those of you who have seen those pictures that we used to do once in a while of what it all looks like if you kind of render it all, write a routine that offline basically renders everything on all the islands out into the distance, it's just a completely, heart-stopping thing to see how much we've all built together, and how big this space is. It's, we're the size of Los Angeles, I believe, at this point, roughly the size of the LA basin here, and that's just a staggering amount of stuff. So, in summary, this hardware that we're about to see come onto the market, kind of led by the wonderful, poster child of the Oculus, is going to fundamentally open the doors to an easier way to sort of interface with the virtual environment. And that means people are going to flood in here because they're not going to have this learning curve, this incredible learning curve that we've all taken on and mastered. I think that the architecture needs to be very open, and I think that we need to contrive of a way to use orders of magnitude more servers than we've been able to use thus far to simulate virtual worlds. And I think that with those things put together, I think the future for educators will be just incredible, because I think you'll suddenly have the ability to bring a lot of people together in one space, and you'll have the ability as a teacher to teach by looking into the eyes of your students.
So that was Philip Rosedale. As opposed to having us analyze this speech, I called up our good friend Philippe Tuque from the Center for Simulations and Virtual Environments Research at the University of Cincinnati in Ohio. She's also the vice president of Avicon. They put on conferences. They put on the last Second Life Community Convention in 2011. Those were the times. Avicon is one of our sponsors. Here's Philippe Tuque with her thoughts on just after the Philip Rosedale speech.
Well, first of all, it was fabulous to see Philip in World again. I probably haven't seen him talking in World for several years now, but it was really funny to me because right out of the gate, he started talking about this theory of identity, that you don't need tags floating over your head. And all I could think was, I don't recognize Philip. He's not in the avatar that I know him as. So I'm a little skeptical of his identity theory because unlike the real world, your visual identity changes in virtual environments. And if I don't have some consistent way of identifying...
But the identity point, isn't that really major for you? I mean, for me it is, because he seems to position himself a Facebook model.
Well, that's true. And, I think that question of identity, we've been, talking about this for 10 years now, that, identity is fluid depending on the context, and we need it to be fluid in the virtual environment as much as we have that flexibility in the real world. So I think that's a fair point. I'm not sure how that will play out either in high fidelity or in, the metaverse to come in the future. I don't know that I think that problem is solved yet.
Yeah. So he was naturally talking about high fidelity. Doesn't it sound a little familiar to you?
I don't know who I was chatting with while he was talking, but I felt like I was time warped back to like 2005 or something. I also felt, when he was talking about this interconnected network of servers and connected worlds and this focus on open source, in that sense, it was like talking about Open Simulator and some of the goals of that project. So I was really glad to hear him talk about this broader metaverse. I was a little surprised that he kept saying virtual worlds and not metaverse. And I was debating about whether to ask him that question instead of the one that I did ask. He talked about everyone needs to be able to run this on their own computer, on their own server. So I'm wondering if high fidelity will not be a service like Second Life where it's really centrally controlled, if he's looking for something that will be distributed in that way. And if so, that would be very exciting. You're sort of contributing your bandwidth or your server power to this greater metaverse. I'm sort of interested to see if this high fidelity service that he's creating is going to focus much more on that distributed, maybe peer-to-peer kind of network, versus something like Second Life, which is, obviously very centrally controlled and run on central servers.
And maybe they're just creating the backbone. They're creating the internet in 3D basically, and then everything else is built on top of it. So maybe he's in reality building the underlying infrastructure of everything that will have to depend on using it. Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. And when he talked about identity like DNS, that's an interesting concept as well. I saw someone in the chat say, "Will we all be assigned an IPv6 address at birth at some point in the future?" I guess the other thing that I thought was interesting. So I asked the question, and I was really glad that Kevin, asked it for me. Many years ago, I asked Philip if he felt that technical challenges or sort of social and cultural issues were the biggest barrier. And, back then his answer was he felt the technical challenges, and his answer has remained the same after 5 years. And I was a little surprised that his perspective hasn't changed, because I feel like that's something that I've learned in all this time in Second Life and OpenSim, is that there's a lot of skepticism and sort of cultural fear about these worlds that I personally think is a big barrier to adoption.
I feel exactly the same way.
It's a really tricky problem. I mean, I don't disagree with him. That high fidelity is focusing on the technical interface challenge. How do we communicate more naturally in these environments? I think that's a huge and crucial issue, and I'm glad somebody's tackling it, but I don't think it's the answer. I don't think it's the only answer to solving the broad adoption question, because I've looked too many people's, into too many people's eyes when I'm showing them these things, and they're even if they could do it naturally and look into, an Oculus Rift and move their hands naturally, I don't think that that's going to change the fear that they feel about the unknown.
I've been trying to explore this many times now. I'm going out, as you know, I'm going out with the recorder sometimes and ask random people, and I get oftentimes the same answer, that there's rejection, not based on issues of the technical interface at all. These are objections and reservations based on deep-seated fears, dismissal, somehow reality being impacted by my engagement with something that is non-existent, or which they call non-existent, and also the fear of the blank canvas to an extent.
I don't know that many of those folks have gotten far enough to feel the fear of the blank canvas.
Yeah, that's true.
You have to get beyond the threshold in order to even, realize that part of the limitation here is simply our imagination.
What do you think the educational community got away with this talk?
Well, I think Philip was always a big supporter of the educational community in Second Life, or at least I always felt that way. And when he talked about that there's something magical when you're in there's some magical component to being in a class together with your classmates, with the professor, with your teacher, and that's something that we've failed to capture in a lot of online education. I think he's absolutely right. And obviously, I've been a longtime supporter of these technologies for distance learning, because even with the low-level technology that we have today with Second Life or Open Simulator or similar platforms, that does more to sort of connect students together. But I think he's right that the full immersion and that sense of presence will only grow. And I think educators are anxious and willing, at least at my university, e-learning and online learning, massively open online courses. These are huge topics of conversation. So I think the educational environment is prepped and ready for technologies that will better facilitate online education. I'm hopeful that these devices like Rift and other things, I think educators are going to be open to it, at least the ones that are teaching online.
Are they open for SL and OpenSim now? I mean, I just hear, it's my own anecdotal experience, but I only hear dismissal left and right.
I think Second Life has a brand name problem, and there are applications that work for education, but it doesn't scale at an institutional level. So I think that scalability problem that Philip talked about has to be resolved before we're going to see any broad adoption in education.
Are you convinced that most people have an opinion on Second Life? Because I'm also not convinced about that. I know people who have never heard of it. They have no association with the name whatsoever, with the brand or with what it stands for. They don't say, oh, I remember that's that thing that doesn't work where a lot of pervs hang out. I don't hear that ever.
I think if people know the name, they have a bad association of it. Otherwise, they don't know the name. It's not that the brand recognition is ubiquitous, but that if they do know anything about Second Life, they don't have a positive opinion. And that kind of attitude from thought leaders and administrators, at least in an educational environment, that's the ball game.
When people listen to this interview, they may have already heard Ebbe Altberg's keynote, which we will dissect. But what do you anticipate from that talk? Reconnecting with the educational market/community?
The honest answer is I don't know. I essentially left the Second Life platform because what I felt like was an abandonment of a community that really worked very hard to not just evangelize Second Life, but really to learn it deeply. I think the educator community pushed the envelope further and faster than almost every other sector in Second Life because we were super motivated. A market and a segment that, if done right, has tremendous outreach to a young audience.
Thank you for your honest answer, but then what does he have to do, or what does the new regime have to do in order to get you guys back? The educational discount has been reinstated, but I'm sure a lot of trust has to be regained. Is there a way for him to set the course so they get you back?
I think that educators need the same things that we needed 5 years ago. In order to really deliver this at an institutional level, we need integration with things like our learning management system, with our LDAP or other authentication systems. We need ways to integrate Second Life into the campus ecosystem. And until that's possible on a technical level, it will always be niche.
But then it's a technical issue. It's not a trust issue per se.
That's for people still in that community to determine. And I don't count myself necessarily in the Second Life education community anymore. So I don't feel like I can honestly answer that question. I think cost is a huge barrier.
I hear from you personally very strong words that there's no way that you will ever again be coming back and even maybe be enthusiastic about, even if they would, let's say, solve all these technical problems that would then make it possible to integrate.
For me, I guess I came to the decision that the content that I create and the experiences I build in virtual environments are mine. And I want the ability to back them up and move them to wherever I'm working. And until Second Life provides that kind of opportunity for me to create and save my own content and share it with whatever platform I want, I won't be back in Second Life. I understand their business model and I wish them well. I mean, I would still say that I'm an advocate for Second Life and virtual worlds. It's just not the right fit for me anymore.
You're disenchanted with Second Life as a walled garden. What could they do to be a leader of an open metaverse? Just my final question.
Well, I think if they were to take a leadership role in providing, say, virtual currency for the open metaverse, letting the Linden dollar be a trusted currency, they already have all the mechanisms in place. They're already a trusted broker. Expand that. Let others take advantage of that. And that would be a way, I think, to sort of bring back those of us who are really interested in the open metaverse to look to them for leadership again. That would be nice.
And maybe open it so that, like these experiments they were doing, so you can teleport from the Second Life grid to all the other grids.
The concept of interconnected worlds that Philip was talking about is the vision of the metaverse. And until Second Life adopts that attitude, they're not part of the metaverse. They're part of their own walled garden. And, at least for me, I'm interested in the metaverse. And I hope that they see that.
So that was Fleep Took, some very good points, how to reconnect. I hope maybe some Lindens are listening. In a couple of sentences, Joe, what was your takeaway from Philip Rosedale talking? He hinted at the fact that stuff that is coming out of High Fidelity, the research that they're doing, can be beneficial for Second Life. Do you think it suggests that, for example, what they're doing in terms of lag research, how they're getting the lag and the distribution of the network such that the lag is reduced, maybe the puppeteering, you think that might come?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's very interesting, and I think that perhaps they're sharing information, sharing ideas, especially now that Facebook is coming, because they're going to be a huge competition, and the only way to stay ahead of that is perhaps to do something together. Especially face recognition, because I would really enjoy that, even though I know a lot of people are going to say, well, I'm not going to let Linden Lab use my webcam to film into my house, or the NSA or whatever, which is fine by me. But I personally would really like to adopt that technology from High Fidelity into Second Life.
I think that's one of the missing links of emotional connection, for sure.
It really brings an avatar to life, whether it's a cartoonish sort of avatar or a realistic sort of avatar. Even when I start moving my mouth in Second Life and talking, even though it's completely unsync and it makes no sense whatsoever, there is already a much bigger difference in how my avatar comes alive, because there is something there that it makes sense.
So in a way you could see High Fidelity is in fact maybe the research arm. Maybe High Fidelity is the real lab and Linden Lab is just sort of the administrator of a really, really messy world.
At least I'm pretty sure that Abby is looking at the High Fidelity and thinking, oh, we could have that. And I'm also pretty sure that the boys at Linden Lab, in the actual lab, not the office, the guys with the white coats, once they see it, they can probably reproduce it.
Well, that's always a good question for our more technically minded and able listeners to comment on the blog. What can be implemented? What do you think can be implemented? And what is just a function of the old code base that cannot be updated to function with the hardware stuff that is coming online in this revolution?
Well, I'm not a very technical person, but I do think that there's going to be a day the old T-Fort can no longer be upgraded. We are running a very old world, and although it keeps improving all the time, there is going to be a moment when the world says, right, you want to add this and add that, and we've reached our limits.
Okay, we're so running out of time now. Really cool things that we're going to do this weekend. I have been glued to my Oculus Rift, of course. I explored Second Life, and I couldn't resist making a little video about Petrovsky Flux. Petrovsky Flux is amazing. It's a build by Plotto Epsilon and Cutea Benelli. You guys gotta really visit this. It's a steampunk contraption, looking like it was left over from the movie City of Lost Children, which is an awesome movie. It's a sculpture with tubes and compartments. They grow organically, then they fall apart. It's surreal. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and don't forget that it grows organically every time. So once all these tunnels have grown into the air and it falls apart, it grows in a completely different way. So the entire sim changes every couple of minutes. It's amazing.
What are you doing, real quick? You mentioned something last week we didn't get to, Arkansas in SL.
Yes, I'm going to Arkansas.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to visit Johnny Cash's childhood home. I think I visited about a year ago, maybe even 2 years, a long time ago, and I really enjoyed it. And I was pretty much assuming that it had gone, but it hadn't. It's been improving, and it looks really, really good. And I'm going to be exploring it with my Oculus. and it looks like my favorite sort of Second Life experience, time travel.
You mentioned the Oculus, and you shouldn't have. Shame on you.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't help it. It's full of details, and that's something that you extra are going to enjoy when you wear some sort of headset.
Very good. And there are other headsets.
Other headsets are available.
Other headsets are available.
The power of time travel in a virtual world. Not only is it fun, but it is also the most educational thing I can think of without actually doing anything educational.
Education. This show all about education. So say it one more time. Jo, please. The Flickr Second Life looking good. The purpose is to collect photos, pictures, snapshots that look better. What's the Flickr group?
It's www.flickr.com/groups/SL is looking good.
SL is looking good.
Yeah.
Everything past 2007, SL is looking good. You accept snapshots only after 2007, right?
Nah, I accept everything that looks good. Hence the name. But yeah, it is a place to collect just the best of the best, not the things that we as Second Life users like. This is not a Flickr group for us, but it is for outsiders. It is for the media. It is for everyone. Whoever says, "Oh, Second Life looks so outdated and has such ugly graphics," I wanted to give you a link that you can say, "Oh, really? Here, have a look at this." That's all.
All right, so we go out today with a great song by a great Second Life artist by the name of Oblé. He's from Colorado and he does some very cool music, occasionally also plays in World. This tune is entitled The Party, and it features P-Funk All-Star Kim Manning on backing vocals. So, talking about music, if you are a Second Life musician, send us your stuff. You may get a big audience that may not be familiar with your music. All right, so that's it. Thanks and have a great weekend. Jo, bye.
Auf Wiedersehen. Bye-bye.
Don't wake me up, just let me sleep. There's a party in my dreams, and the pouring drinks. See a snakeskin man, talking philosophy. There's a three-eyed cow, no jokes to me. To my right, there's a hive bees, collecting dust from sycamore trees. Got no idea what this all means. It's fading away to sound grinding me. But I've got to leave this party and I've got to say goodbye. There's a whole world waiting for me and I'll see you when I die. There's a table and chairs and a smoky ashtray. To my right, space strolls away. I hear a whisper from a long dead friend. Gonna reach you later when you reach the end. And there's a sofa, a feather tree. Others warping, what's happened to me? But I've got to leave this party and I've got to say goodbye. There's a whole world waiting for me. See you when I die. Dealing cards is a man with white eyes. Oh, Mrs. made us apples and fries. And on a pillow sits a girl with four horns. The band is swinging, sound the fire alarm. Don't wake me up, just leave me here. There's a party in my dreams and a pouring beer. Don't wake me up, it's just not fair. There's a party in my dreams and everyone's there. Don't wake me up, just let me sleep. There's a party in my dreams, with pouring drinks. Don't wake me up, just let me sleep. There's a party in my dreams, with pouring drinks.
Radio Hour with Jo Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show is supported by Leap Motion, Caravel Design, Vika Creations, Humanoid Animations, Escapades, Botanical, Death Row Designs, Nansha, Angel Red Couture, and Landscapes Unlimited. Special thanks to myself for providing the station ID this week. Contact the show via Skype, Drax Files, Avatar Drax Files, or email radio@draxfiles.com.
I've got a question here from Draxer who wants to know, will high fidelity make Second Life obsolete?
Well, I think that high fidelity, and as you may know, Linden Lab and Second Life are actually one of the investors in high fidelity. Mm-hmm. What we're doing at high fidelity is sort of farther out and more aggressive and so experimental and different that a lot of the research ideas that'll come out of it will be things that you'll see getting into Second Life over time. Maybe you'll see some of the innovations we've built in high fidelity around things like facial animation, being things that you can try in Second Life. I have very open communications. I was just with Ebe. I've got a great relationship with him. I was just over there the other day telling him about what we're doing, sharing notes. The opportunity long term is big enough that even if we are, two different companies that are competing in some way, who cares if the overall market opportunity is growing? Ebe's here. Cool. I don't see Ebe. Hello, Ebe, wherever you are.